Egypt, they have the Nile, that was fertile soil. The Winooski Valley goes back to Indian times, named for Onion River in Indian language. It was fertile then and it's fertile now.
The closer to the river, the better the land.
And we spent a lot of time down here in Intervale. See, we used to go fishing a lot down back at Beaton Allen Park there.
There were certain places you didn't go in. Burlington and the Intervale was one of them.
The Intervale, which just means a lowland piece of land between higher points, goes all the way up to Richmond and Jonesville, and it's thousands of acres of land.
My father had the farm where the high school is now, the Burlington High School. He had upland farm which he used for pasturing cows at night. In the day they would go down on the Intervale.
And the farm that we were brought up on was formerly Ira Allen's property, the founder of the University of Vermont, Ethan Allen's brother.
It used to make me mad because I had to drink that milk from the cow, and my buddy up the street was getting, oh God, I can't think of the name of the kid, but it'd say like Booth, okay? Mm-hmm. He's drinking Booth milk and I gotta drink that thing. Boy. He didn't know what I had.
Yeah, I grew up right here on Champlain Street. We did a lot of hunting, fishing down here. Cochran's farm was here. Then they had the big pig farm just north of us here. We used to dig all our worms in the pig farm, go fishing for a whole day with 10 minutes worth of worms. We had a real good time.
We used to sell bait, so we used to pick crawlers here. And we'd stop here, and I was a kid, and he'd come in and I'd get permission. Any place we went here, we got permission. And that's the same as why I don't come here anymore, I don't know anybody.
I was 6 years old when my father started working for Lorenzo Howe down off Bradley Road, which is even now Parkway now. Lived in the big house, small part, and then we moved into the bigger part.
The Bartulia family, just before the flood, 1927, they had built a building on an island, what was called an island, down on the river behind where we lived.
My uncle, I can remember him telling me, he would go down and fish timbers as the flood was receding, to try to save the barn to be built later. And that was quite an enterprise, I guess.
I don't think anybody ever went down there, except maybe occasionally they would go down for some reason because you just wanted to see what it was like.
How much of your life have you not been here?
2 years in the service, 46, 47. That's when my father and uncle purchased these farms before the flood. Smaller, 12, 14 cows. They had a job besides. But at the time of the flood, I knew they had quite a problem, and so it's prior to the 27 flood.
And the two brothers just decided, well, let's take a shot at it.
Yeah.
And then they were hit with the flood.
Yeah.
What we have been told is, archaeologically, there was 600-800 years ago, they found signs of Native Americans growing corn down there and actually doing some corn hybridization. But then going forward, there was a succession since the colonial period of people farming down there and providing food for the Burlington area.
Even before the Allens came, the Indians knew that too.
Yeah.
The Indians had cropland down there.
Every once in a while in plowing, we would turn up arrowheads, you know, from where the Indians came. Well, actually, our farm was about 360 acres, most of it on the Intervale, but quite a bit of it also was up where the Burlington High School is now, and also down to the Elks Club.
Mm-hmm.
We used to have night pasture there along North Avenue. We used to cross our cows every morning and every night across North Avenue. And, you know, when they first set up the farming there, that was like the end of the line. The trolley cars went out and they turned at North Beach and went back. That was the turning point. Across the street from the high school, you know where the bluffs are and the condominiums there? That was, they weren't there, and that was the channel. That's where they spent most of their...
Mostly the cows were down
cows,
there.
yeah, pasturing down there.
The first settler did settle down there right around the time of the Revolution, and he built himself a log cabin, and the Indians came. They discovered it, and they came and they went in, and while he hid, they ripped up his, the story is they ripped up his mattress and they spread the feathers everywhere. His family, there was no protection for them here, of course, and the following year, 1776, he decided he was just going down south in Bennington where there was protection and so forth. So he left. So nothing happened in Intervale for a little while there.
Now, see, I didn't know much about the interval, except the Howe farm, but I also knew there was a Perzos farm down here. But in my time, my buddy was a Perzos, so I knew more about, you know, heard more about the Perzo farm than I did the Howe farm.
With that time, Lorenzo, he took a trip out west, and I remember he bought 2 or 3 carloads of Black Angus. And then he had a fellow living in the house, just taking care of those Black Angus. They were in the barn and outside. And he rented it for quite a few years. It was in Dr. Perzo's estate. And I graduated high school in 47. And I couldn't find a job, so he wanted me to go to work for him, so I went to work for him full time. And it was 48 or 49. He bought that farm over there, which was 700 and some odd acres, I believe. He came out to me and he said, boy, I'm in debt, first time. And he says, Chittenden Bank is carrying a mortgage. We've really got to buckle down. Paid $28,000 for it. And then And the next year he came out, he says, I couldn't stand those payments, so I paid it off. Well, he'd give you some money, and he'd take this old, to go get sawdust or whatever, pocketbook with about 4 rubber bands wrapped around it, and before he could come to his money. And he never handed it out this way. It was always back this way, and he'd look at it and then give it to you.
Ira Allen was the one that did the surveying. And so he had first picks on anything he wanted. And he said he wanted the Intervale for his, and so he got it. And the reason for that was it was all forested. Everything was forested, except where the Intervale was, where it flooded every year. After the water subsided, then you could plow and you could plant. So a lot of your work was done for you, and so that's why he decided that that was what he wanted, and he had everything he wanted because he was the surveyor.
I work for a group that bought the Ethan Allen homestead where the buildings are from Burl Morrill and Al Morrill. I also had the pleasure of working with Ralph Nading Hill and the restoration of the Allen house, and with people like George Little and others who were behind the whole idea of documenting the fact it was Ethan Allen's house and restoring it to be open to the public for school children to learn about Vermont history.
Pease Grain Company was originally started up by C.P. Smith. He sold to the Peases, and my aunt was actually a clerk in the office when Mrs. Pease sold it to her. I'm the niece, the grandniece actually, of Burl Morrill, who owned the farm down here. And I was actually born and brought up 1959, up over the hill from here on the other side of the Ethan Allen Park. All of my childhood was spent down here playing in the fields. I believe it was 1947 that she and her then husband, Earl Morrill, purchased this farm and built their big house in the upper meadow.
I helped to found the Winooski Valley Park District. Their original mission really was to preserve lands along the Winooski River or in the Winooski River Valley. And the first acquisition of the Park District was the Green Mountain Power Lands in Winooski. The second acquisition was to begin to assemble the lands in the Intervale.
I'm an old man, the name of Ethan Sims. Recently, I've been working on a project with selections from Ethan Allen's Reason the Only Oracle of Man. And the emphasis of this is on not on the sword raiser with the epaulets, but the philosopher, the writer.
There's a lot of references to the fact that Ethan Allen lived in the Intervale, but no one identified the spot.
There is a letter in existence, I believe, from Ethan Allen to Ira Allen at the sawmill saying, I'm coming up to build my house next spring. Please get the materials ready for a house 32 by 28 or some specific dimension, which is the dimension of the house. Ralph put that together fairly early in the game.
I always understood that Ralph had been paddling or canoeing down the river, and he looked up at the hill that the homestead is on. He said, by gosh, that was Ethan Allen's house. And that's where it all began.
The Winooski Valley Park District had bought all the land surrounding the homestead from Burl Morrill because she wanted to see it preserved. So we owned it, but we didn't know that Ethan Allen lived in the house in the center of it.
My aunt was very frightened at the idea of not having this stay open down here.
Yeah.
And so when the idea of the Winooski Valley Park District taking over down here came up, she was very excited and almost relieved that it would stay the way it is now.
It was Ralph's belief that that was his house, but not until the restoration began, and we began to pull it apart and find the old beams and so forth. And now it's clearly indicated that that house was indeed built in the 1780s, 1790s.
Ralph was the really driving force to make this project happen. And I remember going out in the mid-1970s to what was then a home for the people who ran the tenant farm for the Morals. And we'd go up in the attic and inspect the nail holes and so on, so that he wanted to convince everyone, and including himself, that this was in fact Ethan Allen's original home, and that the evidence shown by the structure of the house was of a building made at that time. First we got the property, then we restored the home, and then we made the educational center out of the old barn.
And we now have 5,500 kids visiting the homestead every year.
As a boy, I made friends of the farm manager there and slept in that house. And I told Ann, I never realized I was sleeping in Ethan Allen's homestead.
He had gone over to get some hay during the winter, and the lake was frozen over.
Just out there.
Yeah, and he got his hay and was coming back, and in those days, to keep warm, they had a flask in their hip pocket, you know, shaped like, you've seen the flasks. Well, he imbibed too much of that, and when came up over the crest, just entering the Ethan Allen farm where the old gate used to be, he fell off the wagon, hit his head, and later died. And that's the stories I know of Ethan Allen.
Grew up down there from the time I was about 1 till I was 13, and just a lot of memories there, and just can remember a lot of things as to...
And your father worked on the Howe farm?
Yes, yes.
The Parazo farm, right?
Yeah.
I too lived down in this house, and I enjoyed it so much, and I can remember what a big house it was, because it was 8 rooms, and it seemed like I know every inch of the inside.
Arthur Bear was a tenant farmer that the BED, Burlington Electric Department, gave a lifelong lease to. Very gentle man, filled with memories and just the love of farming. And he was a poet, and he used to write poems about the garden and activity. And although he couldn't get around too much in his walker, he was sort of the guardian because he was on site. We ran our water systems off of the plumbing at the house. And just visiting with Arthur was always a treat. He always just wanted to take a little bit of your precious time to read you a poem. And you know, in his overalls, he's a very memorable gentleman.
Calkins farm was still running. Rena was here, and there were cows, which of course always once in a while would get into the community garden, so there was always a little interaction with her as far as moving the cows out. But she was still farming here, and all her hired hands were around.
When I came across Rena, it was usually because I had a problem. And, you know, water line was broken, the cows were in the pasture, you know, car was broken down, and we're just always looking for a tool or some time. And she was, you know, you had to like have tough skin around her because, you know, she'd be a little crotchety and busy and, you know, but, you know, always willing to help.
I'd like to see a good dairy here. And when I milked here, I'd hire a man to clean the barn, and I'd pet him, and I milked 44 here alone. I've milked alone, took care of them. I had a good dairy out there, wonderful dairy.
There was a nursery down there that Gove, the florist,
He
operated.
had gladiolas. You know, he was well known for his gladiolas, and they had a shop on Main Street. From the smokestacks, it's about a couple of doors down from the smokestacks, and they had a city place. But yes, they were well known for their glads, and they were all from down there.
I got a job for gladiolas for Glows of Forest, and we'd pick there during the day. That's the only time I ever came here during the day.
Of small dairies at that time. There used to be White's Dairy, there was Collins Dairy, right?
Collins, yes.
Collins right over here. Mercure, the Fitzgerald's.
Yeah.
Fitzgerald had a milk plant in Winooski.
Yeah.
And my father had the Intervale Jersey farm.
Same block, maybe 4 or 5 different milk deliveries.
Every once in a while, you'd say you had a difficulty. The others would step in to help. You know, I remember that the Collins people helped one time, and we had a truck breakdown. They helped out. You know, so people helped each other when they needed to in those days. He and my mother ran that farm. They were in lots of other businesses, though. They were also in the milk business. I mean, they not only had the cows, but they also had a processing plant. He was a producer dealer, and he bottled milk. He had the Jersey Cream Line franchise.
Well, she ran a milk bar. Do you remember the Arms Milk Bar? You know
Yes.
what Lunig's restaurant is?
Yeah.
The western end of Lunig's was Mrs. Arms Milk Bar.
And I'm surprised, Dave, you didn't mention ice cream.
Oh, yeah.
Dad used to make ice cream, and you know,
That's
with the
that for
Jersey
you.
milk.
Yep.
And he let us lick the freezer before he changed
Oh.
mixes.
Very rich. In those days, it would be like what Ben and Jerry's is now.
Mhm.
You know, very rich ice cream.
So this role of dairying all around Burlington 100 years ago, even 50 years ago, must have been pretty important.
Well, right across the street there was the Collins Dairy.
Right here.
Right across the street. They would bring, it's in that gray building, they did their own homogenization there. The farmers would bring it in at 8 o'clock. Since I've been here, they would bring their milk in the morning, they would homogenize it, they would load it into 6 trucks, and it was delivered door to door in their glass bottles. You would hear them clinking out there in the morning when they were loading them up.
Of course, the old dump was west of here.
Where you've got the dump now, or the dump that was called Porter's Point. And as you went down this road, we had to walk down with our sleds and our whatever we had in the wintertime. And down at the bottom there was what he called the point. And then we would slide down that point, and all the kids in the area were there. Because off of Manhattan Drive, that's where you got the old dump pier.
This past winter, I made a mission to go down and see Devil's Den. It's very clear if you go along the belt line, and just before you go up the rise, if you look over on the far bank, you'll see a big opening. That's the cave.
There used to be a ski jump in North Avenue, just before you get to Burlington High School, by the Arms Farm. They built I guess maybe a toboggan slide and a ski jump. You go down the toboggan into there.
Foley Arms used to have a toboggan chute there.
Yep, everybody get on it and go down there.
Yeah.
And that'd go around towards down across the ice towards what do you call their Devil's Den or whatever.
Right.
We call it the lawn pond. I don't know what they call it now. I don't remember, 5-6 feet off the ground down below. And that would shoot right onto the snow and ice and shoot right over where the road is now, the belt line. They'd keep right on going, then you'd have to haul it all the way back up. But that was some ride, when he mentioned that clip. That was some ride. Oh my gosh.
It was a ski jump, very beautiful ski jump. And then right next to it, a toboggan slide, and that was erected actually by the park department. And there was a park department warehouse or something right across the street, which is next to our farm.
Standing water west of the northern connector, before you get to the turnoff to North Avenue, just in front of where the cave is.
Yes.
Was that water always there when you were putting your cows down there, or your father was? Or was that created by the northern connector?
We had a roadway that went across the pond. It wasn't nearly as extensive as it is now. When they put in the belt line, they created a larger pond. It wasn't as large as that. The state built the belt line, and that cut off access to the farmland.
And I've often wondered if, because of all the building, we're getting more floods.
So?
Because that land is paved and it can't absorb water anymore. That's the runoff. Since they put the belt line in, I think I get more water. So it doesn't have that area to go into. But, it's just a supposition on my part. A lot of parking lots don't absorb water either. So I'm kind of concerned about that aspect. Well, we do have our drawbacks here with the flood, but outside that, it's pretty hard to beat production.
It's very fertile soil, wonderful land. It should be used in agriculture. The soil was extremely rich. It was a clay loam. It got flooded almost every year. The farmers up Winooski Valley on up through to Montpelier. A lot of their fertilizers and topsoil would get lost and come down in the river, and it would settle. And every year we would have a silt like that was over the land. And my father, with the help of the soil conservation, added about 25% to the farm by drainage. The corn that my father used to grow was way over his head. I mean, he could grow corn down there that was fantabulous with the ears that long, you know. He grew a lot of clover, the dino clover, which he specialized in because it in the roots generates nitrogen. And so it's a nature's way of restoring nitrogen back to the soil. He believed very strongly in crop rotation.
The soil is rich, 9 inches deep. The black soil, topsoil. The reason I know is because my folks sold a field, and the guy that bought it told us 9 inches.
All this land has been mapped according to the soil type. And as I said, Winooski and Hadley is in the top 3 to 1% of this for drainage properties in the state.
Any farm, no matter where it is, it's got to have good soil.
Right.
And this is river bottom soil, and it's the top soil there is.
Yep. Right.
It has all the features that we ever talk about if we talk about what kind of a soil.
Yep.
It's not sand, it's not gravel, it is the best.
You know, it used to flood every year. Every damn year. Every one of those parcels of land used to be under the river. You can see through the years where they eroded in, and you got new channels around, little islands out there. And since we've been fishing down there, they got a little island out there now. And the river has gone around.
Yeah, yeah. You know, in some parts of the U.S., if they get some real good topsoil like this, they think they're in heaven. Our topsoil was like that. I mean, really rich soil way down. It still is.
I was brought to take a look at the raw land that was here down the Intervale as part of a vision for a company called Gardens